Then, sorry about the setup here, but Stanley wasn't here to set up the microphone. I don't know how to do it, so we're just going to gather as close as we can to Chip. So, if we could start today with the pledge, and then it's a National Day of Prayer at 6 p.m. in all around the country to pray for our country. So maybe we could start with the pledge, and then Chip can lead us in prayer. Dan, would you lead us?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So if y'all would please remove cover, let's open with prayer and just lift this nation and what's about to happen tomorrow up to him, and we'll ask him to have his will and way done. Let's do that. Our gracious Heavenly Father, we are thankful to be able to gather here tonight and yet a free country. We ask that you would just quicken the hearts of your people to stand up for righteousness, and that this election would reflect your views and your values for this nation. While this nation was created, was established, the foundation was laid on your word. And Father, we ask that you would just have your will and way done in this nation once again. Father, we need you. We need you to direct the affairs of this nation. Father, we are the one that are watching to see what is going to happen in this nation, Father God, as we move forward in this world. Father, you've created this place to stand for freedom, for justice, for the rights of the human being, Father, the inalienable rights that were established when this nation was set forth. And Father, we ask that you would just guide us and direct us by your Holy Spirit. Father, we pray and we ask that you would just remove the scales from the eyes of those that do not see this nation what it truly is, and that is a light. That is a place for freedom and refuge. Father, for liberty and those things that we hold so precious and so dear. Father, I ask that you would motivate the hearts of every American to vote tomorrow, that they would go to the polls, and that you would quicken them to help them to vote, Father God, in a way that is going to honor you first of all, and thus honor your people in this nation. Father, we ask for strength, for courage, and Father, I ask that you would just help me tonight to be able to share what I have here, and that, Lord, everyone would be able to get their questions answered, I trust. And Father, we just, all of this we ask in Jesus' precious name. And all of God's people said,
Amen.
Okay, I want to thank you all for coming. I appreciate the opportunity to be able to have a town hall with you. We've got some folks that are still coming in, and we will kind of try to, I'll yell loud enough. Can y'all hear me? Everybody hear what I'm saying? If I'm not hollering loud enough, just please, I will holler louder if I need to. But otherwise, I think we can get through this. Called this town hall, and what I wanted to do is kind of try to give y'all some information before the election. I've had a lot of people call and talk to me about some of the amendments that are going on. That are going to be on your ballot tomorrow, and we can discuss that. We can discuss kind of where the things are at in the legislature. There are a few things that potentially could change tomorrow at the election, but it looks like things are pretty well settled as far as where we're going to be at as far as the majorities, and specifically the House. The Senate is a little less, I don't know what word you'd even call it, a little less concise. It's very, very, very even right now, and there's a lot of discussion on what's going to look like for the leadership in the Senate. I hope that Hicks and Steinmetz and Boner are able to carry the day, but that still remains to be seen. So we'll see how that all shakes out. Currently, right now, it looks like the House has made major gains as far as the conservatives are concerned, and if you want to call it the Freedom Caucus or whatever, you certainly can. The 20th of August saw an extremely large swing in the House. We saw some things happen that were even just amazed me. I was pretty shocked with some of the elections and some former leadership. Currently, actually, the way this actually shook down, I am the only one that will still be serving out of the leadership team that I served with in the last legislature in '67. The former Speaker of the House made an effort to try to move to the Senate. He lost that bid. The former whip decided not to run again for whatever reason, and the former Speaker Pro Tem lost his challenge to a newcomer. And so there's been a definite paradigm shift, quite frankly, in leadership in the Wyoming legislature. The Conservatives picked up, I would say conservatively, 11 additional seats in this last election, and we're going to see approximately 30-some new people come into the legislature. And so it's going to be a very different, very young legislature. I'm going to say probably 45, 46, potentially maybe more, are going to have no more than 2 terms in the House. So there's been a dramatic turnover. Our class came in, there was 18. Last year there was 26 new legislators, and now we're looking at approximately 11. There's about 4 to 5 separate races right now that are going to be determined in the general. Sarah Penn, one specifically out of Fremont County, she has a Democratic opponent, and Ivan Posey. We're very hopeful that she will carry the day on that, and I believe that she will. Jacob Wasserberger is running against a Democratic challenger in Cheyenne. Let's see who else. There's one other one. Oh, all the Democrats are being actually challenged. There's a gentleman by the name of Joe Gustosi in Laramie that is challenging Trey Sherwood, who is sitting currently as a Democrat. That looks extremely positive in that race. So we actually could, depending on how things shake out tomorrow, the Conservatives could actually pick up another 2, even potentially 3 seats tomorrow in the Wyoming House. And so no real changes are going to really happen in the Senate. That was pretty well set and determined in the primary election. So it's very close. I'm going to say that your Senate is going to be broke about 17. There's 31 senators. Looks like right now the coalition, if they have 17, pretty much stayed. We lost one conservative and we gained a conservative. So that's going to be the determination. So if I could encourage all of you to pray that we would see God's will done in the Senate. It's going to be very difficult to get a lot done in the legislature if we run into everything that we sent in the House runs into a wall in the Senate. And so that's where we're at right now, basically. Full disclosure, the way it sits right now, as you probably all know, I am going to be running for the Speaker of the Wyoming House. I've announced that almost a week after the primary took place. The last that I've heard in my conversations with anybody in there, unless something happens immediately, it doesn't sound like they're going to challenge that. So it's the first time in the last 2 sessions we've had no challenge coming into the House leadership. Sadly, I will say this, it's kind of interesting. I had one legislator tell me that he said, we're just going to let you have it. He said, then we're going to come back in 2 years and clean up the mess. So, appreciate your support. I appreciate the fact that you're pro-Wyoming and you're pro the people of Wyoming, but we'll see. I had another gentleman ask me, he said, now you've caught the car, what are you going to do with it? And I said, I guess we're going to get in and we're going to drive it like the people of the state of Wyoming want. And so we'll see how this thing plays out, but quite frankly, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very thankful and I'm very hopeful. I've also got a lot of legislators and senators and representatives that have also contacted me and said that they're thrilled to see the change. And I had one senator that called me and said, I've had legislation that I've held for 2 terms, which would be 8 years. He said, I've never had a chance to even run this legislation for my constituents. He said, I believe that now finally I will have a chance. And so he was very, very excited. And I've actually had 2 calls today from former legislators, senior legislators, that said, I will do everything I possibly can to help you. He said, if you become speaker, he said, you have my number. He said, I will do everything I can to help you in any way that I can, in any information that I have that would be of use to you. So it's been very, very positive. So I would really appreciate all of you praying for us all, not just me, but all of us, because this is going to be a very much a corporate effort in order to do things right. A lot of what we're going to deal with is going to be determined tomorrow, as you all well know. I see some Trump hats in here. Thank God for that. Appreciate your support for President Trump. I believe that he will carry the day. I have very little doubt that he's going to get this thing. I don't know, folks. If he doesn't, it's going to be a very difficult road to hoe for Wyoming. We right now are dealing with some consequences of past administrations in some of our revenue streams. And so there's a lot hanging on what happens tomorrow. And the one guy told me, he says, he said, now when Trump's talking drill, baby, drill, he said, that's going to make oil not worth as much. And he said, it's going to hurt our markets. And I'm like, the reality of it is we're being hurt right now by the cost of inflation and everything else. It's not just the oil markets that drive our economy. We have all of this that has to be factored into the cost of our goods and services. It's an ability to be able to produce our own energy and do it cost effectively here at home is going to mean that all sectors will benefit from it. And right now, and maybe I've chatted with you guys before about this, the Powder River Basin in Wyoming is the most exciting oil play in the world right now. And the conversations with the Wyoming Petroleum Association, Pete Obermuller, he said there are 13 separate plays that they are just now working on in Wyoming. And he said last year alone, he said they drilled the highest producing oil well in the history of the United States in the Powder River Basin. And he said that we know what's going on in the Permian. He said that's pretty well discovered. He said, but there are numerous numbers of companies that are in Wyoming right now actively drilling and exploring, trying to figure out. He said, we've done 2 plays, and when I say a play, these are literally layers of opportunity or oil, gases, and different things like that. He said, we've been able to pretty well work through 2 and figure out where they're at. He said, there's 11 others. He said that we are still trying to work through and figure out how we can manage them and what we're going to do with them. And so it's an extremely exciting time if we have the support from our administration on the federal level. And so we're going to see how that develops tomorrow. So I'm very positive about it, and I think we've got a real opportunity. In the interim, we do have some responsibilities that we need to take care of. Because of the position that I have, I'm looking like I'm going to be moving into potentially, I've had the opportunity to have some meetings with some of the folks that you never hear about. As a legislator, I've never had the opportunity to go to some of these meetings and be given this information. And so we had an opportunity to sit down and have an actual explanation of where our revenue streams are, what's happening as far as our revenue coming in, and that was very illuminating about where Wyoming is at as far as our gas, our oil, and our coal. Coal is in a difficult situation right now. And the reason I say that is because we have just simply not allowed any permits. And the issue with our coal is that it takes approximately 10 years to get a permit. If you started today, they said when I was touring with the Bel Air mine, and then we were discussing this in a revenue meeting, he said it takes approximately 10 years. It's from the beginning of a permit to the actual ability to be able to mine. He said most of these mines, he said, are not going to have enough coal to be able to span that 10-year period. So that's another thing that's going to be very, very important as we move forward with our new administration. I trust that President Trump, when he gets in there, and that he will remove a lot of those regulations and help us to be free of a lot of those time constraints to help our industries go. I just heard today from one of the Wyoming Business Alliance that there's going to be some discussion. They've got a new investor that has come in and invested in Peabody Energy, and they're out of Texas, and they're coming in here with a desire to build a coal-fired power plant in the Powder River Basin. And he said because there is so much desire and interest in data and the amount of data that we're having through AI and everything, AI and the data industry needs massive quantities of electricity to function. And so this company is coming now to talk to Wyoming about potentially them building a new power plant, similar to what we've evidently looking at with Dry Fork Station, with the technology that we have, and generating electricity in an effort to draw these different companies to Wyoming, because we can develop and we can produce clean, affordable, reliable electricity in mass. And that's what they need. And so those are the kind of things that are just kind of holding back, waiting to see what happens with this administration. I trust change, and then we'll see those things start to move ahead. One other thing I did learn is that last year, because of the reduction in our full surface bonus leases, and those are what we get paid as the coal is mined, and then we get these from federal lands, and so a portion of that returns, 49%. It's either 51 or 49%. I'd have to go back and look at my figures, but I believe 49% of it returns back to the state of, no, 51% comes back to Wyoming, 49% goes to federal. Well, of those 49%, those were the coal surface bonus leases on federal lands. Well, we haven't had this year, last year, will be the last year that we've had a coal surface bonus lease coming in. So that has put a major crunch on what we've been doing to fund our education and a lot of our infrastructure in the state of Wyoming. In 23 was the first year that we actually had to go into SIPA and some of our savings accounts to actually backfill because our revenues did not meet our demands for our expenses as a state. So that's something that we got to be very cognizant of, and we'll have to see how that handles moving forward. But we do have an issue coming on here with revenue, and we're just going to have to see basically what happens with our extractive industries moving forward. So it's the first time since they kept those records that we've actually had to go back and start to take basically our savings to backfill the need for the spending that we had at that time. So that's something that we're probably going to have to address. We are seeing currently right now, we saw oil starting to drop, diminish. Oil has bottomed out, and we now are starting to see oil start to turn up in production. And so that is going to help us on our revenue. Coal is continuing to slide down because of the lack of ability to come up with leases. And also our gas, which was kind of interesting to me, but our natural gas, our methane or our natural gas is following coal in that same decline. And the reason that is because we have dry gas. And that's a different demand in the market. Now, we saw an enormous spike in that 2 years ago. California was buying our gas at over $50 per MCF, and we were shipping a bunch of it. And Wyoming had a huge balloon in the income level that came in. But now that gas has dropped from $50 an MCF to the last I saw it around $2.35 an MCF. So that was a major hit. Now, we stopped a bunch of that money away, and so that's what went into those reserve accounts and into some of the permanent mineral trust fund and into the common school fund. So we put about $700 million of that. We ultimately put away approximately $1.3 billion, I believe it was. About $600 million of that went into reserve accounts that could be brought back and utilized if necessary. The other $700 million was put into permanent savings that cannot be brought back. They're there to generate revenue, and we'll spend off of that investment income. Currently in Wyoming right now, we have approximately 25 to 30% of the money that we spend is actually being generated by our investment income. We have approximately $27 billion in investment. Now, as we see those dollars maybe having to be pulled out of, that could be diminished. Now we've got the Craig report. I've got it right here. For any of you that would like to look at this, it's not the easiest thing to dig through, but this is what we call the goldenrod. This gives us an idea forecasting out through 25 and 26. They actually forecasted a little bearish. What it came back in is we're going to be, it looks like about $122 million better off than what they anticipated. But there is a bill coming out of school facilities that's asking for $485 million in school construction. And so $122 million will disappear pretty quickly if that comes to fruition. So those are some of the discussions that we're going to have about whether or not we build new, or we're going to look at whether or not we need to do some maintenance and how we're going to manage those dollars. Or we're going to go ahead and pull more money out of savings in order to do those things. We're just going to have an objective conversation about what's going to be the best and wisest long-term use of those dollars and how we can keep doing what we need to do. Any questions? Anybody? Yes, Ms. Love.
You keep talking about revenue. How about cutting the budget? What happened to the conversation about cutting?
Well, that is a very good question, and that's what we're going to be talking about. You know, they asked me, I said, what are you going to do? I mean, last year we passed the largest budget in the state's history last year. And so, it has been a very interesting thing for me as a legislator to be able to have these conversations and actually kind of see what's going on and where things can move.
In addition to the weekly printed version of the newsletter journal, we also promote our community and share important information on our award-winning website, newslj.com, and in our weekly email newsletter, Nuke Now. We also connect with readers through various social media platforms and invite you to check us out on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can even take a look at a recent meeting of the City Council, School Board, or County Commission on our YouTube channel. We do hope that you will go to newslj.com and subscribe today, and we look forward to making all of our great content available to you. But regardless of your level of support, we thank you from the bottom of our hearts for doing your part to preserve a free and independent local press.
And so, it has been a very interesting thing for me as a legislator to be able to have these conversations and actually kind of see what's going on and where things can move. I think we're going to come to a point very quickly where we're going to have some very serious conversations about what we want to spend and what we can't spend. If by some awful reason this administration doesn't change, Wyoming is going to have to take a very different look at how we spend our money. We're going to have to anyway. We're already starting to use our savings. A major part, and I've got school board members here from Weston County, a major part of this next decision that we're going to have is recalibration is coming up. And we have not actually passed a recalibration since I think 2005. And there are ECAs that are being discussed right now. Those are external cost adjustments to go to the districts. And so that is a very good question. And that's what we're going to have to do when we get there, once this is decided, and we see how we're going to do it, and who's going to be on these committees. There's going to be a very real discussion about needs and wants. I mean, here's the thing, and that's what I'm here to talk to you all about. What do you want to do? We have relied extensively for years on the extractive industry to supply a lot of the dollars, and we put a lot of money away. Now, a lot of those monies were put in there for the rainy day. Well, there's folks that are telling me it's raining. So, do you do that? I would have to say that there's no way that if our coal industry and our extractive industries start to slide more than they are right now, which they are on a slide. Two of them are. One of them is rebounding. There is no way that we're going to be able to make up the difference with property taxes. Now, we are, I will say this, our dollars have changed. Tourism is becoming a very large part of what Wyoming generates as revenue. So those tourism dollars and how we manage those dollars are going to have to be a very real part of this. Sales taxes increase as we see growth and everything like that. Those are all things that are going to have to be factored into the equation. But the biggest thing I have heard from everybody is property taxes. And that they're just paying too much in property taxes. And we need to reevaluate how we evaluate our property taxes and how we're going to generate this income.
Which brings us to Amendment A.
Which brings you to Amendment A. We can discuss Amendment A. Amendment A, for those of you who do not know, is an effort to change our Constitution. Currently, Wyoming has 3 separate categories for property tax. We have industrial, we have agricultural, and we have commercial residential. Amendment A would separate commercial from residential and make 4 categories. The idea being that if we separate residential away from commercial, then we could in effect lower the percentage rate, because right now commercial and residential I believe is 9.5%. Isn't that correct? 9.5%. So the idea was that if we separate residential away from commercial, then we can lower residential property taxes. But this is specifically for owner-occupied homes. So this is going to separate. Right now, currently, they're together, commercial and residential. Okay. I voted for it to let the people to vote on it. Now, I can give you my opinion of what I think it is, but I'm going to be a no vote on this for me personally. The reason is I'm going to give you my reason why, and I don't care how you all vote, this is up to you guys, but this is why I think this is a problem. If we split those four, there is no guarantee that we are going to reduce the amount of spending to give a break to the residential. So, if we don't do anything about spending, then we are going to have to find the money elsewhere to continue if we give residential the break. That's immediately going to mean it's either going to have to be passed on to commercial, who don't pay taxes. Corporations do not pay taxes, ladies and gentlemen. I'll argue this with you all day long. Corporations are a piece of paper. People pay taxes. That corporation, if they create a good or a service, they are simply going to add that extra expense onto that good or service, and they're going to pass it on to the consumer. That's just the way it is. The only other one that they can add it to would be agriculture. Agriculture does not get to determine that they can just add that expense on. Agriculture is completely at the whim of the market. So if they add more taxes to us, we're just going to take it out of the bottom line. Yes, Paul?
Back to Susan's question, because I don't feel it was answered. Where can cuts come? Where do you see that we can start cutting?
Well, I mean, that's the thing we're going to have to sit down and try to figure out, Walter. I wish I could tell you that I know where all the problems lie. I can tell you that where we spend a lot of money, our biggest expense in Wyoming is healthcare. Even more than education. So we are going to have to look at what we can do to try to streamline or to find things that are going to be positives or negatives. We're going to have to compare what we can stand and what the people of Wyoming are willing to put up with or not have. So we got to look at healthcare. I mean, there's all the way things all the way down to there's some of these committees and some of these select committees in my mind that we don't need. But that's a small piece of the pie. I mean, the 800-pound gorilla in the room, let's all be honest, and I've dealt with it, and it's not the most popular content thing to talk about, is education. And what we spend on education. There are major problems in my mind. I need a problem. I don't need a problem. I just need something to stand and hold on to. I'm waiting for my ass to get chewed on this deal, but anyway, that's okay. The problem that we've got is right now, we've got, and I know this, we have got facilities that have been allowed to go in disrepair in an effort to be able to get a new facility. And so, do you reward that behavior? Do you look at what we're spending and do you have to say, can we afford to continue to spend that way? I watched 2 years ago as Charlie Scott brought a bill to the House Education Committee when I was on it, asking for communities to have to be partially responsible for bonding of new facilities. And they laughed him out of the committee. I mean, it was embarrassing to watch what they did to that old man in that committee. And now we're getting to the point where we're having to start to use our savings in order to be able to continue to sustain the spending level. I don't know. This is going to be, I am not looking forward to being in this position. I'm going to do it, but I'm not looking, there are going to be some very difficult things that are going to have to be done. There are going to have to be real conversations about local control. I know this gentleman over here is your school board chair. He wants local control. That's my preference. But it's not a problem in this district that I know of. But I've got districts across the state that when we give money to those in a block grant form, it doesn't get to the teachers. I have county commissioners that come to me and say, how can a school district build a $19 million school pool out of their surplus funds, and we can't put enough money together to get a decent blade to keep the roads open? So how do I answer that? How does a school district have $19 million in surplus funds? Do school districts need to be... Nice up. It's been great visiting with y'all. You guys have a wonderful trip home. You know, I mean, these are honest discussions that we're going to have. What's necessary and what's not. Quite frankly, I do believe that school choice is going to be something that's going to come on, and it's going to be something that we're going to have to seriously look at. I think competition is going to be part of this.
What about block grants? Do you
Block
see anything
funding,
happening?
well, and
or
it's-
block funding, yeah.
Block funding is the way we've always done it for education. University does it too. And I just had a long sit-down visit with Ed Seidel here just the other day and several of the other deans. And they're very concerned about not being able to dispense the dollars wherever they would like for them to go. But here's the problem. If administration is growing, which it is in the UW, we'll say but UW specifically, administration is growing, teachers are reducing, where's the money going? If I give you $1 million and it's supposed to go to teachers in the classroom and it doesn't get there, the only answer I've got is you need to talk to him. Because that's a local control issue. They have to know what their districts need to be able to accomplish what is, you know, the job that is set before them. Now this, Mr. Lambert right there, he is on the Standards Commission. That's another major problem we've got. We've expanded this thing to the point where a lot of teachers are very frustrated with what they're being expected to try to get across. And he was charged with the responsibility of trying to refine this, and let's get this scope of this thing pulled down to where it's less laborious and it's more refined. Those are all dollars. When we as a legislature put other things on it, like we want computer science, and we want this, and we want this, and we want this, and the districts have to come up with a way of funding it, and sometimes we pass, you know, unfunded mandates on our school districts. That's a major problem. Because then they're charged with the responsibility of funding it if we didn't send them money to fund it. That's not fair. So there's going to be a major discussion, recalibration. Yes.
Yeah, you just said it though, kind of. The Wyoming spends per student, what, first or second in the nation, and then academically we come in the middle of the pack. There's got to be some room in there somewhere to fix something.
I think right now, the last figures I saw, we're right around 4th or 5th in the
still.
nation.
We're not 4th or 5th academically.
Yeah, no, we're right in the middle of that.
Yeah.
And so, that is a very real problem.
So there lies part of our problem.
Well, and that's the discussion that we need to have as taxpayers and stakeholders is what's the revenue? Because I don't think pulling more money out has been the answer. I mean, we threw a lot of money at the school districts, and when we had a lot of cold surface post leases, 2005, 6, and 7, and in that area and on, we spent a lot of money, and we built a lot of stuff, and now that stuff's having to be maintained. You know, you can't just let something fall apart. You've got to take care of it. You know, and that's the problem I alluded to there earlier on. We do have districts that are not replacing their roofs and things like that in the hope that they can move up on the list and get a new school. I mean, we tore down a better school than we built in Hewlett. That's what the contractor told me. Yeah, look, we're here visiting in a building that was, you know, yeah. Yes, Tim.
Chip, if you don't mind.
No.
I just need to, you know, the first thing like, well, Daddy was part of this deal too, but when we built schools here, it did go to the taxpayers. The local people overwhelmingly voted to spend the money. Danny, you're shaking your head, that's how it was. because you were on that committee, and so the public was involved in that process. And the second part is the state legislators through the Judy Ketchel, way back in the day, they said how big your hallways had to be and how many classrooms and how many square feet. So a lot of that stuff was led by the top. And it was dang sure not led by the local community. And the second thing, when you're talking about the block grant, if our district would have followed the state block grant, we'd have had like a fourth of a CTE teacher at the time I was on the board. That's the only thing they were gonna fund was a fourth of a teacher. So if we didn't have that block grant, we wouldn't have had a BOAG program. We wouldn't have had a music program. We wouldn't have had an art program. So that local control has worked. I hate to have everybody sit here and think local control has been the bad thing for everything. It hasn't.
And it hasn't, and that's why I say that in Weston County, I don't have a problem. Cook County's not a problem. But I've got districts around the state that are just train wrecks. And I'm not gonna list them, but I mean, we can chat about it later, but I can tell you, our districts that are causing a lot of heartache in the decision-making process as far as education spending is concerned. You know, a lot of the discussion is we've got 48 school districts, and I voted to make sure that we had our small school districts because we don't want to lose our local control that way. But the discussion is very real. In Fremont County, we've got 8 school districts in Fremont County. Some of them are within 10 miles of each other. We've got 48 superintendents in 23 counties. You want to be the person that touches consolidation? I'm on my way out anyway. Shall I touch it? You know, I mean, Kirk County's already been consolidated. Sundance, Hewlett, and Morcom. It was a major issue. Major issue. A lot of heartache. A lot of people very upset, very mad. They lost their autonomy. You know, there was just no voice for the local communities. But how can we honestly look at costs if we don't take an honest look at that? Because when the state took over the funding, you know, quite frankly, they took away a lot of your local control. Because I know that when we were building schools, and I remember my mom and dad, there had to be community buy-in if you were going to put an addition on school. They had to come to the community and they had to say, we need this. And you know what that meant? Is that there was local ownership. Because they said, okay, all of you guys, you go ahead and assess me some more. I'm all in. And when they took that and they kind of moved it to the School Facilities Commission, and they said, you know, your number's up, you get a school. That's where I have conversations with Ainsworth Benning walking through a perfectly good facility. That's like, I'm building you a crappier school than what we're standing in. He said, the one I'm tearing down is not as good as the one I'm going to build you. So that money's just gone. I mean, it just goes. So that's why I want these meetings. I need you guys to speak up and tell me what you think is the best way to do this, because we're going to get down there and we're going to see the books and we're going to know what's coming in. And I'm going to need you guys to tell us how you want to spend it or not spend it, and how much you're willing to carry in order to keep the ship rolling. Because if things don't go perfectly, then we're going to have some very serious conversations about where the money's going to come from. I've got people that tell me you ain't taxed enough. I got people telling me I can't afford it. You know, I mean, it's like when we talk about acquisition costs. Immediately, education says we can't stand that. We need that money. Because I've got people there that are saying, well, why is that unfair? I have a hard time answering that question. I don't know why it's not fair. You should pay based on what you paid for your property with an escalator. If somebody's willing to come in and pay $1.5 million for a house, they got the wherewithal and the means to do that, that's their choice. But it shouldn't mean that suddenly my house that I bought 15 years ago is suddenly worth that much in that LEA or, you know, land economic area. Is that fair? I just don't see how it is. And we've seen major jumps on the ranch. Just for example, my own personal, I'll give you the numbers. In the past 10 years, my ag taxes have gone up in Crook County on the ranch 156% in 10 years. I just got the figure just the other day. You know, and that's not a big deal. I mean, if there's people out there that say, you shouldn't bitch, Chip, that's pretty cheap. But now let's stop and do some figuring, ladies and gentlemen. If you figure that I'm over in country over there where it takes 3 tons of hay to winter a cow, and $200 a ton hay is $600 for her to get through the winter. $40 a month, and I figure everything based on what I would sell it for or have to purchase it for. Anybody that tells you, well, I put that hay up for $100 a ton, that's not the actual value. You have to figure what you would have to pay for that, or what you could sell it for. That's your actual cost in the real life. Depreciation, breeding that cow, running her for a summer, loss, and winter. It was, I figured up that one time there about 2 years ago, I had about $925 in that cow.
The new store. This is the one-stop shop. We have a pharmacy. We have a bootlegger's liquor. The deli, the food that you can get at a lunchtime is so amazing. The coffee shop. Certain Friday mornings, there's 30 people sitting here in all these chairs. This is the hub for people to come and visit, have their coffee, have their donuts. It's amazing what this area has done. Totally amazing.
That's your actual cost in the real life. Depreciation, breeding that cow, running her for a summer, loss, and winter. It was, I figured up that one time there about 2 years ago, I had about $925 in that cow. Getting her through a year. I was selling steer calves for $1,050 a head at that time. So my taxes, it takes 200 of my cows, the net profit on 200 of my cows, just to pay my property taxes in Crook County. I mean, am I wrong? That's a fact. So please don't tell me I'm not paying enough. And then say that, you know what, you can afford more. Well, I don't know where you're going to get it because I can't demand any more, but there are others that can say, you're going to pay this for that product or you're not going to own it. I would love to buy his heifer calves. And not everybody thinks about it, but it's like, he's got them in a feedlot, I found out just now. Went and shipped them out of the country on me. Didn't even ask. Acts like he owns his own place and does whatever he wants, like he's some private owner that does stuff. And now, oh, she said it. See? She did that. But here's what I have to factor. Those heifer calves right now are probably worth his, depending on if they weigh 500, they're probably going to be worth about $1,500, $1,600 a head. I just paid that for some the other day. And now I've got to figure out how I'm going to run them all winter at $1.75 a day, paying for them. By spring, they're going to be close to $2,000 a piece. So that's my consideration then. Do I want to try to talk to him and Mrs. Lambert about buying their heifers for spring if they have some extras? Because I'm going to pay 8% interest on that right now. So those are the things I look at. Are you going to make it? And here's the other fun part of it. What are you going to get for them bred heifers next fall if I try to sell them? And I've tried to lock them in, but not everybody is exactly excited about locking in a price on a bred heifer right now.
So I have another question on Calvin. What can we do to fight the electronic tag thing, and how much does that cost?
Okay. There is a bill coming out of the Ag Department right now, out of the Ag Committee, with the specific design to require that the state of Wyoming pursue memorandums of understanding with other states so that we can ship our cattle to other states. The way that law is currently written, let me back up. It is not a law. It is a rule. It was never passed by Congress. This is a ruling set down by an agency. And so with that in mind, in that language, there is an ability to be able to, if you have a reciprocating state that recognizes your identification, it has nothing to do with you. And this is why I have major problems with this EID and everybody just getting ready to roll over and just say it's coming, we just better get on the bandwagon. Wyoming, the millions of dollars that they're spending right now to do this, 25 million, is going to allow 11% of the animals to be identified. In order, what we're asking for is disease traceability. That's what the whole premise of this is all about, disease traceability. In order to have disease traceability, you need 80% compliance. That's a fact. You can talk to the US, they need 80% of the people in this country to comply with that ruling in order to have true disease traceability. This entire 25 million will establish 11%. And the only reason that you have to have that tag is if you are shipping across state lines. If you are an export state, which Wyoming is, everything that's 18 months old or older that leaves this state is going to be required to have that tag as of tomorrow. And it's a ruling. That's just the way it is tomorrow if something doesn't happen. Now there's been a law, there's not been a law, but there's been an injunction, a lawsuit filed against it by RCAP and several others in an effort to stay it for 6 months while we sort this out and allow the states to be able to do something about letting them go on about business as usual. Because when I passed that that statute, when I first got in, we codified the 2013 USDA rules saying that you could use bright tags, back tags, brands, tattoos, earmarks, EID if you wanted. But the other states and then the USDA had to recognize that we had those different choices. And I talked to that the other day, Wade Crawford, Sundance Vet, Cook County. I said, Wade, can you do a better job of identifying these animals with an electronic tag? And he said unequivocally, no. He said, I have got records, that metal tag in their ear, and he said, if she leaves the state, she says she has to have an identifying tag in her ear. He says, it falls all the way back to where that animal was vaccinated. He said, I've still got people telling me that of records that we keep right here for cows that come through a sale barn or somewhere in Iowa, he said, with no ear tag. He said, but they've got the shield in their ear or a bank tag. And he said, I can trace them right back. He said, you're not going to get better identification. Here is what I believe is happening. And I know this may sound like a conspiracy theorist, but this is what I believe. I believe that because Wyoming is an export state and that they are going to put this on us, which means that everything that we sell, if we want to butcher something, unless it's local, has to go out of state to be processed. It's going to require a tag. That is going to allow us the ability to be controlled as a premises. You mark my words, ladies and gentlemen, premises identification is at our doorstep. And you are not going to be able to market your livestock if you do not have this tag. And that premises identification will come back because there's 85% of the animals that are processed in the United States are processed by 4 packers, 3 of which are foreign owned. And they are closely aligned with the USDA. If you want to market your animals, you're going to have that tag. It is a full-on effort, because here's the other part of this. This is the other stupid part of this that just blows me away, and I don't know why, and I haven't seen anything from my very own Wyoming Stockbrokers Ring. I'm coming out and fighting this. Is that if an animal is born and raised, lives and dies in Nebraska, they don't have to have a tag. If he's born, raised, and lives and dies in Colorado, where there's processing plants and everything, they don't even have to have a tag. If they don't cross the state line, there's no requirement. So explain to me how we are providing disease traceability. We're not. What we have done is we just watching tomorrow morning the beginning of the camel's nose under the tent, because they're counting on the fact that because Wyoming is such a small voice as an export state, that places like Iowa, Colorado, Nebraska, Oklahoma, Texas don't care. This isn't going to affect my producers unless the animal leaves the state, and most of them won't. Like the other day, when I sold heifers, I sold them into Kansas. I'm gonna have to have a tag.
I thought it was expensive. I mean, I know the government says they're gonna pay for it the first year or so, but I thought it was expensive. Is it prohibitive?
It's an extremely expensive. That wand is not cheap. And another part of this, Vet told him, he said, those things come out. And he said, have you ever tried to read an electronic plastic button tag with all the little teeny numbers on it after about 3 years? He said, they're almost impossible to read. And he said, the regulation clearly says it has to be legible, readable, from the eye, not just the wand. And here's the other part of this, ladies and gentlemen, that we need to realize. These are low-frequency tags that we're asking for. They make a high-frequency tag that they can monitor that tag from miles away. This low-frequency tag has to be read from about me to her. You can't be much farther than that, and that wand won't pick it up. So if I swipe that over that cow and her head comes in, then it'll pick it up. And that number is attached to your ranch. In Ireland, I believe it was, here, just a year, not even a year ago, they're fully compliant with all this. They slaughtered 42,000 head of cattle in the name of climate, global warming.
Oh.
Do you know what they charge you in Denmark as a tax for global warming? Because they have all of your animals identified and numbered. It's $100 a head tax for climate change. This is not about disease traceability. This is about controlling our food supply and the private landowners that produce it. That is the way it is. And this is simply, a lot of people say, well, they're paying for it, no big deal. Yeah, just, if you want to use it, go ahead. But just let us, as livestock producers, go on with business as usual, and let us identify our livestock the way we see fit, without the specter of, I'm going to stop you from being able to market your livestock if you cross a state line. Not every, I mean, literally, if you look, if anybody, I would encourage you, look up the fill out survey or whatever it is to qualify for beef quality assurance. It's enormous. If you want to be certified beef quality assurance, there's a lot of stuff you've got to comply with in there. And you attach that number to that. We're talking about fence lines that have to have a barbless wire so many inches above the ground for wildlife. Have you got your fuel tanks? Are you hiring a certain number of people? All these things, all are factored into this, because how do you handle your livestock? Do you use an electric cattle prod? All these different things and stuff. You damage the animals. You stress. What are your working facilities like? All this stuff is compliance, because people want to know that their animals are handled gently or whatever. But pretty quick, if I can't sell my product to anybody but that 15% because I'm too bullheaded and I'm not going to do it, it'll put me out of business. And that's what it boils down to. Yes.
They did the very same thing with COVID vaccines and warning.
You have to have a shot card.
Same thing.
Yeah. Well, you see it. It's coming. And my problem with it is, ladies and gentlemen, is that they're going to implement this, and the only ones that are going to be screaming are places like Wyoming, and we're too small to make enough noise, because the big states are like, it ain't going to bother us. So if you're really serious about disease traceability, then why does it matter if you have to have those tags in anybody else if the animal doesn't leave the state? You're not after disease traceability. You're after control of our food supply. Yes.
Now, go back to education. You asked what we want to do. My question to you is, Chip, what would be the biggest advantage and the biggest disadvantage if Trump gets his way? There will no longer be a federal Department of Education. So what are the good things of that? And is there any bad things? And if that happens, what we're talking about now in the school system would be totally different without a federal Department of Education. We got along just fine from 1992 with no federal Department of Education.
Well, we've already discussed this, and we only get about 9 to 10% of our budget comes from the federal government. Right. But with that money comes strings, and it creates a tremendous, and I mean, and Curtis can probably tell us about, and Bill too. the amount of extra testing and things and compliance issues that come with that. I was told that they said they're making maybe 1 to 2% on the money, because they spend most of that 9% on just compliance.
Right.
And it adds a lot of layers of nonsense that the teachers have to deal with. We've already talked about it. It was like $182 million was all the feds were giving us. If we just said, keep your money, we'll manage our own school districts.
Right.
That would be
What I'm saying is
a
if they take
huge
that
benefit, I
away
think, to local control.
where we can do that.
Yes.
Because right now, we can't do it because the local leaders that think they know shit, they don't know nothing, don't want to do it. But what I'm saying is our plan, we might want to program in no Department of Education. Instead of trying to figure out how to keep the spending that we got right now.
Oh,
If we go to strictly, and if you go back, and I don't know if it's in the Constitution or the state statutes, but it says the state of Wyoming can tell no school district what they have to teach, or what they can or cannot teach, and that's happened all the time. It's unmandated.
and that goes back in Article 7 of our Constitution. The Constitution is where we're at as far as our requirements for education. And a lot of that was also very, very much changed with the Washakie and Campbell decisions, which came down that required the school districts have to provide a certain level of education. They said that you had to be able to have the child educated the same whether they were in Sundance, Wyoming, or Cheyenne. That was literally stated in the doing that absolutely, in my mind, changed the ability of local school districts to be able to provide the education they need. I'll give you another example of it that I just learned. Do you know that 60% of the jobs right now in the state of Wyoming that are available are CTE requirement jobs? We spend approximately 1.6 to 1.7% of our budgets on CTE education. That I got from the University of Wyoming, CTE Rob Hill.
Explain what CTE is.
Career and technical education. We are talking about stuff where we need welders, we need fitters, we need plumbers, we need electricians, we need all these. Those are the jobs in Wyoming that are currently 6 out of every 10 jobs that are available right now are CTE jobs. And we are not meeting that demand. And that's what's being relayed to me. There's not enough emphasis being placed on career and technical education training coming out of our high schools and out of our community colleges. Yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry, I'm always.
That's
So
fine.
this July College is kind of a example of the industry pushing the education and or the workforce that's needed. Did that model? How can that model help us save money? You see what I think that the plumbing industry should build a plumbing college if they need plumbers.
We've got that right now up in Gillette, like you said. We've got companies that are actively supporting those classes in an effort to try to train up skilled laborers for their
And
business.
push more of that education cost into the private sector.
See, and I've had conversations with a gentleman by the name of Rex Shattuck. He was a former chief of staff for Senator Newman out of Alaska. And he said what they did on education up there is in an effort to try to encourage businesses to invest in education. He said they gave a tax credit to those businesses for giving money to career and technical. And it's interesting to me because Alaska does not have an income tax. Generally, that's the thing that is. You've got to give them a break on their income tax in order to encourage it. So he wants to chat with me about things that they did up there that maybe Wyoming could look at to encourage businesses to invest more money in career and technical education and help pay for some of this expense and reduce the load on the
I
taxpayer.
think you get the better balance of what you need.
Yes, because they're trying to create their workforce.
Right.
And so now there was also, and maybe you guys can tell me, I was contacted by somebody that said in 2002, the state of Wyoming legislature passed a bill that was called the 29% for career and technical education. It was designated specifically for career and technical education. In 2002, they said Senator Hank Coe was the one that did that. And they said that then in a year or so, they said the Superintendent's Association or whatever kicked back against it. He said that money just disappeared into the walk grant. But he said there was 29% money, that's the way he's calling it, And I'm digging into it, I'm gonna try to figure out what it is, but it was actual 29% money. He said that law is still on the books. And he said that money was supposed to be designated for career and technical education in our high schools. He said that money was colored for career and technical development. He said it was for teachers, and he said it was for the classroom. It was called 29% now.
One thing I would say was shock me if it came from Hank Cole, because that was the year of the 4-year education, the only way they wanted.
Is that right? He said Hank Cole was part of that. And I'll dig through that bill and see if I can find it. But there are things that I'm learning that are out there that we need to look at, and that was a colored money. They said that money was designated. When it came in, you had your block, but you also had money that was just disappeared. Well, see, that's the block thing. That's where local control comes in. The superintendents and the school boards make that determination. Generally, the superintendents will make that determination and recommend it to the school boards to pass. And this is just an honest question. I don't want to try to make anybody mad, but I'm just asking. Is that, but like what we're saying, if you had true local control, then they would recognize the issues and what's going on and what they need. The markets would drive what's happening in the districts. But so often, to Dan's point, when we take federal funds, then our teachers were having to say, well, you got to do this. In order to get those dollars, you got to do this. And I literally stood up on the floor, go back and look at the video, and I said, if any state in the union could live without federal funds, it's Wyoming. And they about blew a gasket. They said, well, we can't do it. We can't live without that federal money. They said, we'll never make it. And it's like, well, you don't want them to control you, but you don't want to not take the money. It's the same thing with the school lunch deal. Remember when they were, if you didn't become compliant, they were not going to feed the kids. Who was it called me? I was here in Newcastle. I was sitting out in front. Some reporter called me. Oh, it was Leo Wolfson. Called me. He said, what are you going to do about this? And I'm like, we'll pay for those kids. We are not going to have a kid in Wyoming hungry. This state will not do that. Leo Wolfson called me. He said, what are you going to do about this? And I'm like, we'll pay for those kids. We are not going to have a kid in Wyoming hungry. This state will not do that. Oh, so you don't think you need to have those federal funds? Not if it means that I'm going to have to force a guy into the girls' locker room or the girls' bathroom. I will not take that. So that just disappeared, you know? And it's the same thing with what's going on with the University of Wyoming. I had that discussion with Ed Seidel. I appreciate the fact that we did not play San Jose State because they've got a male player. And the only thing that bothered me is that we weren't one. We were the third school that decided not to do it. We should have been the first school that decided not to do it because, like I told Seidel, I have 3 granddaughters. I'm not going to put them in a position where some man can spike a ball and hit one of them. I can show you a video of a young girl in high school, senior, that took a shot in the face by a male player, and she needed a tutor to be able to graduate that year. She's still impaired. Yes?
I'm going to test your real favorite.
Oh, I love the real favorite. Dare I ask what this one is?
Here in the next month, there's going to be a notification go to the state about a senator and representative vacancy in Weston County. You're now the Speaker of the House. What's that? Boy, that's unusual. I'm bringing up the Article 3, Section 3 of the Wyoming Constitution, and the fact that, as we all know, the county commissioners right now are catching a lot of flack, saying that they're trying to do this, they're trying to do that, and so when they redo, they're going to have another meeting here in a week or so and reappoint a senator for the position that's vacant. And we need to support the county commissioners because they didn't start this thing. We started it back in 2014. There was a whole different board in there at the time, and they unanimously voted to go forward with Article 3, Section 3. And we have been working as a county for 11 years, for the last 14 years. and we've got it. And the Freedom Caucus, John Baird 2 years ago wouldn't even speak to me about it. And now he says he's on board with it. And we got the state Republican Party on board with it. And this is going to affect you too, because if we do this, then you're going to have to get some more bodies for your district to meet the 9,000. Okay? My question is, everybody keeps saying, oh, well, it's going to go to court. Well, two attorneys that together, I don't know how many years of law they have, but it's a bunch. They both say there's no way Weston County can be sued. One, there's no damage. Who did we damage by appointing a constitutional representative of the state? My question is, if you listen to Driscoll, which God help us, it's going to go to the legislative service, and it's going to go to Chuck Gray, and it's going to go to court. As Speaker of the House, you're going to be the Speaker of the House. I'm hoping and praying. We'll see. This is probably going to come through on your desk. So can you put in any more information? We know that we've done what we've had to do to get it to this step. We know that when the names go down, Frank is going to pass them on to the state.
The Secretary of State.
Secretary of State. What power does the legislative service have over it? Now, some people say they just disseminate information.
That's what they do. The LSO has no power, they can only make recommendations.
That's my understanding. But, so, once that gets there, we don't know what the next step is. And I don't think anybody knows, because it's never happened.
I think that's where it's at.
So if Chuck Gray holds true to his word, that he will support it, and says, oh yeah, I recognize this as an electable position. Now, JD came to our meeting at the library the other day, and he came up to me and said, and he kept talking away from me too. He gave us a card with his email and his phone number and all that, and he goes, Danny, where this is going to be won is in committee. Would you be willing to come to Cheyenne and testify at the committee? And I said, yes. And I told Frank, he said, would you be willing? I said, I'll talk to anybody, do anything I can to help. You know. So, what can we expect? What do you see going forward? And is there anything we can do to facilitate this? Or we just got to wait until Chuck Gray says that?
Chip, can I intervene and explain to the crowd some details on this issue before? I got this story from William Curley, and it struck me as just a perfect scenario of what has happened. So what he said was, back in the 1960s, the federal court looked at the 14th Amendment, and they came out with a they determined that what the 14th Amendment said in the 1960s was the one man, one vote. Now, the 14th Amendment doesn't use those words, but a federal court of law has interpreted the 14th Amendment to be one man, one vote. So that you have to have representatives representing about the same number of people in each district. Almost all of the states were then immediately out of compliance with the federal constitution. So that all the states had to go to the drawing board on their districts and try to meet the one man, one vote along with their state constitution. And it took 30 years to get all 50 states in compliance with the new interpretation of the 14th Amendment. One of the very last states to come into compliance was Wyoming. And so this happened like in 1960, the interpretation. Fast forward to 1989, Wyoming gets sued because we're not in compliance with the 14th Amendment. So they go to federal court, and a judge says, Wyoming, you shall comply with the 14th Amendment, redo your districts, figure it out. So what the Wyoming legislature does is nothing. They do nothing. So about 2 years later, they got sued again. And that judge said, you were just here 2 years ago. You were told to fix this. You didn't fix it, and I'm not a happy man. So he said, you will fix it, or I'll fix it for you. I'll make your districts for you if you're not going to fix it. Well, the fear of God got put in the legislature. So what they chose to do was they came back to the state of Wyoming and they gerrymandered districts all over the place, all in compliance with the federal law, 14th Amendment. Everything's fine, right? Well, no, because our state constitution says that our county boundaries have to be district boundaries. So the solution was not finished. And what they could have done to comply with both constitutions was increase the size of our legislature by a lot, I'll admit. But there's a second choice. They could have amended the state constitution so they're in compliance with both. But they didn't do that. So that was about 1991, 1992 that this all started. And then, so they gerrymandered the lines all over the place. We're not in compliance with the state constitution. 10 years later, you redo the districts. There's a big battle. You need to fix this, legislature. You need to fix this. Either amend the constitution in the state or follow the constitution of the state. Big battle. Lost the battle. Gerrymandered the lines some more. Now that's 2002. So then you go to 2012, there's a big battle. Hey, legislature, you're not following the state constitution. Either follow it or amend it. Lost that battle. The counties have risen up, a lot of them. They passed resolutions that they want the Article 3, Section 3, part of our state constitution followed. And nothing happens. So now you go to 2022, primary district, big battle, you need to either follow the state constitution or amend the state constitution. Nothing happens. So Weston County has been in this battle for a long time, and Val's been leading the battle since 1992. We finally got in 2014, the Board of Commissioners started supporting it. The local GOP supports it. The state now supports it, but nothing gets done. So we came to a point where we have a state constitution. It's what gives the legislatures all their power. They have no power that's not provided by the state constitution. And Weston County said, by God, there's a senator and a representative in the state constitution for every county. We don't have one of either, so we're going to declare vacancies. So we went back to the last people who were in those positions in 1992, Jerry Dixon, Tisdale was the other one. They were both happened to be Republicans. So according to statute, you replace those people, and those vacancies have to be Republican by the Republican Party. And we follow the state statute. We declared vacancies. We're following statutes to appoint people for those positions. And we're going to send them to Cheyenne, to Chuck Gray, and see if they get sworn in or not. And my personal opinion is, if Chuck Gray doesn't swear him in, he's going to get sued. and Chuck Gray does swear him in, he's gonna get sued. I mean, that's probably where it's going. But what we need is a state judge, not a federal judge. We have no qualms following the 14th Amendment. We're just fine following the federal Constitution. We need a state judge to now put the fear of God in the legislature and say, hey, this is what your state constitution says. This is the only power you have. Either amend it or follow it.
To go further on that though, if you go back and you have to look up the lawsuit, and they told Sheriff Mack, and Sheriff Mack sat right in this room about 12 years ago and gave a speech about it. And the federal government, the United States Supreme Court, he took it all the way, him and a few other sheriffs. And the Supreme Court said, and it was over making guys register their pistols and stuff. It was a Second Amendment deal. But the case that went to the United States Supreme Court ruled that the federal government cannot dictate how a state legislature runs their state. And we have a constitutional free republic. A lot of states don't. Some of them are commonwealths, but we have a constitutional free republic, the same as the federal government's constitutional free republic. You got to throw this Democrat crap out of your head, democracy. We don't have that here. We don't want it here. But they rule that they cannot dictate to the state legislature. The legislature is a power unto itself. So, if that's the case, and in the federal judge that settled that case in '92 said, ultimately, you would have to ignore your constitution to do what you're going to do. He didn't say we could. He didn't say we had to. He said you would have to. He said, but ultimately, it's the power of the people. And in '92, they said we couldn't expand the legislature because we couldn't afford it. Okay, we were in a bind. When did we remodel the 3 years ago?
It was before me, so it was 1 year.
Doesn't matter when we did it, but we spent $330 million to remodel the Capitol. And you know how many new desks we put in? 0. This is not about, this is Cheyenne, Laramie County, and Atrona County wanting to own and run Wyoming as their democracy. And there's 23 counties that make up this state. And the state of Wyoming has no power that we don't give them. And that's very specifically spelled out in the Constitution. And the United States government accepted our Constitution as written, therefore. And so, when, heaven forbid, Chip's saying we got power plants coming in and stuff, someday we may get 2 representatives. But according to our state constitution, they will still have to lines for that representation. We will split the county and the state in half. The nearest equal there is, but 1 representative will run from these counties and 1 representative will represent. They cannot cross a county line. So if we just jump across the county line now, we'll have that fight again in 20 years when we, God forbid, I'm not here, or I won't be here, to see that much population in this state. So, well, a lot of misinformation's going out there, people. I love Chip. But he's not my representative because he don't live in the county. He can't bring no money to me. I have nothing wrong against JD. But when JD goes to the legislature, and there's a lot of people in this county that voted for JD, and some of them didn't even know he wasn't from this county. And I'm willing to work for JD, and he told me 2 years ago, we had a meeting in Upton when he first got appointed, that he was for 1 senator, 1 representative. So, The county commissioners are feeling a little bit raw right now from the static and uninformed people saying, oh, we're trying to take their vote away. Well, no, if anybody's vote's being taken away, my vote's being taken away. Because the Wyoming State Constitution says Danny Babb can vote for somebody that lives in Weston County to represent him in Cheyenne. And you see what happened when one of our county commissioners needed the insurance, but he didn't want to live in the county anymore. That got settled. You got to live in the county. Well, if you got to live in the county to get county insurance, you ought to have to live in the county to represent the county. And it's a nightmare for Chip and JD. Chip drives clear down here, and anybody that lives in Newcastle, he's just talking in the wind because you guys can't help him. Osage can help him. Upton can help him, but the majority can't. Get informed and inform your neighbors, because there's a lot of people out there. Trish has done a real good job on the Facebook, and Don Taylor has, and some of the worst critics are now saying, oh, well, we didn't understand it. You know, well, if you don't understand, jerk your head out of the back of your pants and get up here and get informed, because it's going to affect everybody. We can't ask for a better representative than Chip, but he's only one man in Cheyenne. And if you want Cheyenne and Casper to run this state, just keep going ahead and ignoring the Constitution, because that's what it's going to do. Any advice? Comments?
Well, and you guys know, I support you in this effort. And if that comes to that point, you have my word that I will bring the legislation. I mean, that's my responsibility as speaker. I do believe that you have JD's support, because I've heard that he's actively working with some other groups to try to figure out how to address the senator issue and stuff like that. There are discussions that are down there. They're talking about, you know, what would we do? Would we look at expanding the representatives in the state of Wyoming and to compensate for it? Because that's what it boils down to. You have to take your smallest county, Niobrara, population-wise. They would get one senator and one representative, but then we would have to divide that number into counties like Albany, Laramie, whatever. But there's also discussions about waiting, not waiting as in waiting for somebody to get dressed before you go, but I mean is weighted as the measure of weight of each county's district's representative based on not having to expand the number of people in the building, but it would expand the weight of that representative.
Again, I respect him coming into the lion's den. Weston County is notoriously conservative. And JD came in and stood at the front of a room where he knew he was in the minority and took questions, which is better than I can say for others from that wing of the party. That's my problem. So, you know, Chip not getting a chance to respond, hey, through no fault of our own or no fault of the Freedom Caucus, because the Freedom Caucus shows up, they've kind of had the stage to themselves. But for J.D. Williams to do something that, you know, Ogden wouldn't do, you know, Liz Cheney wouldn't do, I mean, who he gets lumped in with, he came right up and he saw people and he talked to people.
Is weighted as the measure of weight of each county's district's representative based on not having to expand the number of people in the building, but it would expand the weight of that representative. I've had some discussions that they said that could potentially satisfy the vote, but that's yet to be determined. I think that probably will be
Why do we do? You know, I was instrumental in getting 5 county commissioners. And the way we set that up, what the people voted for, that had to go to the vote of the people. We had 3 counties, or 3 districts, which was Newcastle School District, Osage School District, and Upton School District. And 1 county commissioner had to live in those districts. And the other 2 were at large. Because we don't think it's fair that Osage would have the same amount of pull as Newcastle. So the other 2 were directly of all the people, like it was, the 3 were all for the whole county. But then Osage had no representation. And we were the richest school district in the town. County at that time. That's why Newcastle demanded we come in. Why can't we do that in the state? Have one from each county and then have statewide districts. Cheyenne might get more people. That they would represent the whole state, but then we would have somebody, each county would still have say. And those, if they were not, if they were, you could reword that with I don't know if you'd have to change the Constitution, because you wouldn't be in violation of the Constitution, you would be creating another district. If Weston County couldn't tell you, because, hey, we're only entitled to 1 and 1. So the bigger counties would represent everybody in the state.
Well, at this point, the only thing I can see, Danny, is that we need to see and wait what the determination is made by Chuck Ray. If that will, because there's going to be a certifying of the electors, because after tomorrow, the elections take place, and that's one of the first things that has to happen before we can even convene as legislature, is these will have to be certified. And that's not an LSA deal, that's simply the Secretary of State's going to have to come in and make that recommendation. We'll go on, there's literally a group of legislators, they'll go in another room, they'll say, sure enough, they're all certified, elected by their districts. And then those people will be signed in, sworn in, and then it will begin. But to me, the determination is going to have to come from the Secretary of State. And then, if some reason doesn't happen, then statutorily or anything like that, then the discussion needs to take place, and that's where JD will probably be on track in saying this will be a piece of legislation that is brought as a bill form or a resolution that will be brought and discussed in committee. And then that's where this discussion ought to take place, and see if that up or down vote at the bottom.
But see, Tracy Hunt was one of the commissioners 14 years ago who signed this.
Yeah, Tracy tried to fight it, and they threw him. I talked to Tracy.
He took the court and stuff. Yeah. But his theory is there's no grounds, and Wayne Curley says there's no grounds to sue the county commissioners or sue Weston County. There's no damage to this and that. But Tracy, after fighting his lawsuit, this and that, and he was county attorney for a while, he says they're just going to stiff on us at the legislature.
And that's what he told me that the other day. He said that he said, you're not, he said, Chip, he said, you're not going to be able to just override the say seat. He said, you don't have that authority. He said, that is going to have to be something that is going to have to be a determination made by the Attorney General or something else, or the Secretary of State that is going to have to say that. So I don't know, man. I wish I could tell you this is going to happen, but I honestly God don't know.
Well, I don't think anybody knows.
No, but my issue is, and I will maintain this, and I said this at the commission, you're right in the fact that if we don't get a hold of this and recognize that the rural vote is diminishing, that they're going to act like a democracy, and what Weston County says, or Crook, or Niobrara, or Goshen, or any of those counties, maybe a little bit more. Because I did some math, and just for example, I think it takes, 13 counties, the total population of 13 rural counties, to equal the population of the vote equivalent of Cheyenne. It takes, I think, 11 to just be able to compete with Gillette in Campbell County alone. It's not going to be about whether or not your vote is. That's the same thing I deal with my hunters. Minnesota, they said red, but they said we have to do whatever Minneapolis, St. Paul, the Twin Cities tells us. He said we're not. He said it's not. There's no autonomy at all. He said it's not a representative republic. He said it's a democracy, and he said we have to do whatever they tell us. So to your point, I mean, if this doesn't work somehow, some way, we don't adjust it, your rural vote isn't going to matter. 20% of the population of the state's in Cheyenne right now.
I'll shut up after this. I wanted to have this conversation, Chip, because I knew where you were and whatever, but I wanted for the people here that maybe knew that hasn't known all this. Get to your neighbor. Get to anybody that comes on social media and explain to them. We're not attacking JD. We're not attacking Chip. We're not doing away with people's vote. But either we're a county or we're not a county. And thank God we have Chip Alan, and JD, they see it, but a lot of the people don't, and the commissioners are in a bad way. They're not at fault. They didn't even start it. They just agreed with what 14 years ago they said, see what you can do, and we went and did it with the other counties, and now we've got it statewide. And so these commissioners go, and to Garrett's credit, he goes, sometimes, well, they did it and they decided to back up, and Garrett's got the best saying. They said, well, maybe it'd be better to wait till the next 10 years. And I said, well, all of us are not going to be here in 10 years. I'm not going to be here in 10 years.
Who said?
I'm pretty sure. I don't know. I'm evil, but you know, only the good die young, but I don't think it's that bad. That I'm going to live another 10 years. Garrett says, when is a good time to adhere to the Constitution? There is no time better than now, because if you don't adhere to it today, you won't adhere to it tomorrow. And the tipping point is here. I mean, in 1992, when I filed suit in this county over it myself, nobody's seen it, because we had still had Jerry Dixon, Morris Tisdale. I had Maureen Simons from Cook County in those days, and she was an excellent representative. But now people have seen it, the abortions that have gone on. You send 5 people to Niobrara County to vote somebody in. They don't even live in his district. Weston County got to send 5 people down there. And none of the commissioners, only one of the commissioners lived in that side of the county, and they voted whether JD got in or not. If JD had lost, he would have, if I'd been JD and wanted the job, I would have stood up and said, hey, those 4 people can't even vote. They don't live in the district I'm being appointed to. That's how messed up it is, people. We've got to get back. We either are going to be a county, or one of these days we're going to walk up to the courthouse and push a little screen and send our money to Campbell County. Because we're not a county. So these people, you people here are the ones that's in the know. We've got to get the word spread. Thanks, Jim.
You bet. Well, no, and it's not going to be easy. Nobody here is going to tell you that this is going to be fun. He's going to successfully make my life a living hell for 2 years, and I welcome it. So we'll see. I think it has to be. I think it has to be discussed, and I think it has to be honestly taken care of. To me, the part of this that concerns me is if we don't, like you said, do something now, we're not going to have representation, and then so yes, Kurt.
So more about what Danny's talking about.
Can you
so
speak up?
Let's say that Niobrara gets 1 and then that divided. Speak up, please. How many representatives would there be in Shawnee? Close to 250. How many? Close to 250. And today there's how many?
There's 20. How many people are in Niobrara County?
25%.
27. No, 2,500. There's 575,000 people in the state of Wyoming was last count. Divided by 2,500, 230.
So, New Hampshire has 400 right now.
So right now we have 1 vote for 62. If this goes through, we're going to have 1 vote for 250 something. Is that, am I understanding this correctly?
Well, there's,
Even if you do the weighted thing, there's still going to be that same spot.
the thing is,
Here's to me, and I don't mean to interrupt you. What to me the difference is that you will have Senate. The whole crux of this is the fact that each county will have 1. So it would set up our state, which is set up very similar to what our national legislature is. Each state, no matter the fact that Wyoming only has 575,000 people, we have 2 senators, exactly the same as California. So when Jefferson set this whole thing up, he called the Senate, well, not him, but I mean, what his determination was that the Senate is the cooling tray. The population is represented by the House of Representatives based on population. And they can do whatever they want. They can wrestle or anything like that. but it has to pass the Senate. So what it does, by doing what he's wanting to do, and what our Constitution says is, you're not going to run the length of Weston County nor Niobrara, because Cheyenne needs Niobrara's vote in the Senate to pass anything. And that gives a small rural community like Wyoming in basically comparison to the national, a voice. And right now they don't, because they have been basically blocked in with enough people that they don't have that voice. Well, if you recognize the county lines based on the fact that we recognize states lines, then that allows our Wyoming legislature the ability to be representative of numbers. And that's another thing, the determination of people in the state of Wyoming have to make. If we really do want to fund that many legislators, that's our call. That's a determination we'll have to say we want to do, and we can do that. But what it'll do is it will control what's happening in the state by the fact that every county will have a say in the Senate about what happens. And Niobrara will have no less say about what happens with legislation than 100 and some thousand people in Cheyenne, Wyoming. Suddenly, the rural vote matters. It will make a difference if we get Washakie, Hot Springs, Niobrara, Crook, Weston County all together, because that town down there and the bigger metropolitan municipal areas are going to need your vote in order to get legislation passed. And that's the other part of this, that right now we can pass stuff, you really have very little to say about it because it's a democracy. It's a majority vote, you know, because you want to raise your taxes, nothing to say about it, we're just going to raise them. You ain't got enough votes to say no.
So this will help us in the Senate.
Oh my God, it will be transformational in the Senate, Curtis. It will be transformational because Weston County will have one of 23 votes.
Chip,
Yes.
I don't want to correct you, but the Constitution doesn't say that. Because when it was originally set up, Niobrara had 3 senators.
But the way we're discussing it though would be just one senator
But all I'm saying is if you go back and actually follow what the Wyoming Constitution says, the population centers will actually have more senators than we would have. It was either 1, 2, or 3 senators, depending upon the size of the county. That's in the Constitution.
Right, but the way they did that, this clause causes a lot of problems, and I can't cite it verbatim, but it's like, that what you're saying is true, but at no time can there be more than 2/3 of whatever it says. And that's how they controlled that. Go ahead, Trish, you probably know.
The state constitution probably needs amended because there is a proportion where you can't have more than 2/3 as many representative senators. That's in that same Article 3, Section 3. There's 3 parts to Article 3, Section 3, and I haven't come prepared with.
So if there's 23, then you could never have more than 3
Then
times
there's
that
a
amount.
limit on representatives, yeah. So
Wow, that would be excellent,
what they
because that
did
keeps
is-
you right where you're at.
they've ignored the first part of our of that Article 3, Section 3, follow county lines as district lines. Why didn't they just keep that and then ignore the second part about how many representatives to how many senators? Why did they choose to? There's 3 parts to Article 3, Section 3. And any one of them they could have ignored. They decided to ignore the county lines as district lines. I submit that the Constitution of our state probably needs amended to fix this. But that has to be done by a vote of the people. You can't just ignore the Constitution if you don't like it. You can't say, well, Article 3, Section 3, we're going to ignore this part. There's even a little notation. We're going to ignore this part because of a federal judge ruling. That's not how it works. And I don't think, I mean, New Hampshire has 400 representatives. The little state of New Hampshire has 400 representatives. I'm guessing the state of Wyoming doesn't want to go that way. We don't probably want 230 representatives. Well, then amend the Constitution, and if you wanted to say Article 3, Section 3, we should gerrymander lines wherever it benefits the most powerful in our state, then amend it to say that. And then at least we're in compliance. Your oath is to follow the Constitution.
It is, we can talk about this for a little bit longer, and even with this adjustment, this will get discussed further. It is 7:37. I promised myself that I would not keep you here longer than an hour and a half, because you probably won't go. And so I would say this, and I appreciate your information, Dan, and all that. Are there any other questions for me? I will gladly stay here as long as you
It's
want.
like you could just say yes or no.
No, what's that?
Is there any legislation addressing the fact that we cannot hand count ballots that are made for the machine? Is there any legislation, are they working on?
I do believe there is some legislation coming, and and that was one thing that we talked about, we sent out a poll, and I'll just tell you a little bit about what we're planning. There were 5 specific things that the people of the state of Wyoming, we paid $16,000 for this poll. Trump's pollsters did this for us. And we blanketed the state, we got all the information back, and we're working off of that poll. There are 5 things people of the state of Wyoming are the most concerned about. Number 1 is election integrity, and making sure that people in Wyoming are actually Wyoming citizens that are U.S. citizens. That was number 1. Number 2 was getting DEI and everything out of all of our institutes, grade schools, all the way to our institutes of higher learning. This is specific to state Wyoming. Number 3, I believe, was making sure that we disavow the use of driver's licenses given to illegal aliens by other states, that Wyoming will not recognize those driver's licenses to vote or to do anything in Wyoming. If you're an illegal alien and you have a driver's license from New York or California, you can't use that in Wyoming. That was number 3. Number 4 was no more investing in ESG, making sure that all of our investments and stuff are not actually working against us. And number 5 was property taxes. Believe it or not. Number 5 was property taxes. So just to give you all an idea. So yes, election integrity is the number 1 issue for people in the state of Wyoming. And I do believe there is, unless Alan knows something otherwise, I do believe there is legislation that's going to be brought to allow for hand counting of the ballots. Not just running them back through the machine again, but actually physically hand counting the machine, the ballots. Because we have printed ballots. Every ballot that's run is a printed paper ballot that is stored in your county clerks for 2 years.
But we can't touch it.
But you can't, it's currently, if you want to, you can go ahead and file or pay so much to have them recounted, but they just run them back through machines. So what you're saying is we want to be able to actually physically hand count those ballots that have been kept, paper ballots for 2 years. I don't check. But I do believe, yes, I do believe there is that legislation will be coming.
I'll follow up on that.
I'm sure it will be coming out. Send it to corporations and let them look at it. Yes, anybody else? Does anybody else?
So if there's no other questions, I just wanted to present Chip with this. This was passed by the Weston County Republican Party at our meeting last week, and it is an endorsement of our legislative leadership candidates that you had mentioned. And the Weston County Republican Party, if I just may read 2 whereases. Whereas Chip Neiman has demonstrated a clear commitment to the platform, especially in support of election integrity and pro-life legislation, and whereas in his position as majority floor leader, Representative Chip Neiman has managed bills with an emphasis on fiscal responsibility, constitutional principles, freedom, and liberty. And we'd just like to say thank you and endorse the rest of the slate of candidates.
In addition to the weekly printed version of the newsletter journal, we also promote our community and share important information on our award-winning website, newslj.com, and in our weekly email newsletter, Nuke Now. We also connect with readers through various social media platforms and invite you to check us out on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can even take a look at a recent meeting of the City Council, School Board, or County Commission on our YouTube channel. We do hope that you will go to newslj.com and subscribe today, and we look forward to making all of our great content available to you. But regardless of your level of support, we thank you from the bottom of our hearts for doing your part to preserve a free and independent local press.
Representative Chip Neiman has managed bills with an emphasis on fiscal responsibility, constitutional principles, freedom, and liberty. And we'd just like to say thank you and endorse the rest of the slate of candidates for legislative leadership. So, thank you.
Well, thank you all very much. I really do value the opportunity to be able to come down here and chat with all of you. I'm a better legislator because of you guys. It's not the thing that I bring to the table, it's the fact that you guys all have something that you can share.
What's that make Ogden then?
Huh?
What's that make Ogden?
I don't know. I don't speak for Ogden just yet. I have to talk for himself. That's his deal. I'm not gonna cast shade on him or nothing. It's my senator, right? But I really appreciate everything that you folks do and your commitment to freedom and this country. And I just do, before we leave, I would like to close this thing and if somebody else has any questions they'd like to ask. Alan, do you have anything you'd like to share as a sitting representative from Weston County? Not really? Come on, Alan.
I guess just one thing I would like to share, going back to the whole senator and representative deal. It's coming back to the representative part of that. And as a representative, I mean, we're fixated on this one man, one vote deal. And we don't have to do it that way. I mean, if you do, each county gets one. And if you just take a Wyoming County or a state map, all you've got, and just figure 10,000 is the breaking point. Every county under 10,000 gets one representative. And if you go over 10,000, at each 10,000 break, you can round if you want. But if you do that, and you go through the whole state, basically you end up with 69 representatives divided throughout the state. Because right now, our representative districts are just over 9,000 people, I think. That's how they have them broke up. So if you just go through it, every county that's under 9,000 or under 10,000 gets one. And as you go up in increments of 10,000, you add representatives. And it just almost perfectly works out to 69 representatives, which is the magic number according to our Constitution. You have no more than 3 senators, or 3 representatives for the number of senators, 3 times. And so that does work. Granted, it isn't exactly equal, but the bigger counties you have more votes, and the smaller counties get a little bit more representation, if you want to put it that way. But it does work that way, and it still fits the representative type of government. It doesn't fit the democracy model, but otherwise it works that way. So that's just a comment I want everybody to let you know. I mean, I understand there's going to be some core challenges, but this is an issue where the state of Wyoming, in my opinion, needs to stand up to the federal government and say, we're going to run our elections the way we want to run our elections in our state, and let the federal government sue us. I mean, the Ag Committee is putting forth a bill to put money forward so the legislature can fund some of these type of lawsuits if they come against us. And I don't know. I'm not saying that I like the idea of spending money on lawsuits, but that seems to be the way a lot of things that they do more expensive in court.
I do have one question for y'all before I leave. I'm going to be going down to a management council meeting on the 7th and 8th of this month, just next day or so here. We're shipping calves tomorrow, or getting ready to get in the next day with shipping. I'm headed to Cheyenne. We're going to be discussing the Kelly parcel, and whether or not we're going to be selling that thing. What are your thoughts? Don't sell? Don't sell.
Don't sell.
Okay. They're talking about $100 million. Huh? It goes to common school trust fund. It's school land, this would go and be invested in the common school trust fund, and then it would be held there for generating revenue from the trust fund.
Create that one school section for all the federal land in the state.
Are there any other thoughts? Is there anybody in here that says we should sell it?
Who's buying?
Huh?
Who's buying?
Federal government. If they want to buy it, add it to Teton Park.
Federal government's got too much of Wyoming.
Okay, here is a proposal, then I'm just gonna lay this out for you, because this is actually in the works. This has already been plotted out. I've already had the conversation with the state land office down there, with Jason Crowder. He showed me the map, and it's called the Penguin. And there is like, I think, 107,000 acres of BLM land in Converse County, Wyoming. And the proposal is we would trade that school section, that 640 acres, for that 107,000 acres of land, because it's quote-unquote equal value, land-wise. We would get the mineral rights.
We would get the.
We would. And so what that would do is that would...
That's a whole lot better deal. If they get the mineral rights, no.
Yeah, and so, but we would get the mineral rights, and those lands would become state of Wyoming lands. We've traded them for school trust lands, which would mean that would have an additional 107,000 acres that would be able to be invested into this common school trust fund. As those revenues come off, the state's fiduciary duty would be to manage those lands, the state lands. They would be school lands and go into the same things. They are helping to pay those expenses and to invest money in our education system. Are any of you against the idea of trying to push that instead of just turning this thing over and selling it for the $100 million?
I'm against it.
You're against trading it for the 107,000? Okay.
I think BLM land should come back to the state.
Okay. I'm with you on that. And in fact, we have filed an amicus brief with Utah, who just recently sent to the Supreme Court in an effort to try to take all of their federal lands back and make them state trust lands.
So then we would, if we did the Penguin thing, then we would wind up with nothing. I mean, we would have no gain. We'd just be out our Kelly land.
You would end up, if we did that, you would actually, the only thing that they would be able to hold on to is basically the parks.
And see, and then they gain the park, the land into the park, and they would still have it. And then the BLM land should come back to the state anyway.
Anyway, yeah.
So we'd be trading for land that we should have in.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
My
But
opinion.
if we don't make it, then we would have 107,000 acres of something that we may not get depending on how we fight. You would? Okay. I personally am in favor of it because at this very point, anything we can get away from the federal government and use it. And actually that land and that trade, the design is that you can still be able to access it, travel on it, hunt on it.
You read the 30-30 plan?
Huh? Yeah, I have. I've heard of the 30 by 30 plan, but that's why we joined with Utah in an effort to try to take our federal lands back. We're supporting Utah in their effort, so we're positioning ourselves to do the same thing in Wyoming. And so, yes, Curtis.
Chip, I got one more comment on this. You know, you talked about districts that aren't maintaining their buildings so that they can get on the list and be on the list for the license.
Jump up from the Mercer side, yeah.
So I guess, from my perspective, I'm a little concerned that some of the laws might be made for those districts that will be made because of those districts that will affect all districts. And that might have a
Every reason to be
negative
concerned about that.
effect on us.
You have every reason to be concerned because if you bad apples and spoil the barrel.
Right.
And that's what we're dealing with.
Yep.
You know, and that's the problem. You know, it's just like it's like the point I talked about the superintendent part and the administration and the districts. 48 districts in 23 counties. Some of them are very close. Why do we have that many superintendents for districts that close? Those administration is a major part of the dollars we're spending as a state. Aren't there any way that we can work together on this? Are there such diversity in the communities that they would not be able to work together. Now, diversity here is very different from Newcastle here versus Weston County. It's a rural district versus a more municipal district. You can see that. But when you're looking at that conversation, how are you guys so different that you couldn't figure out how to get one administrator? I mean, for example, Aurora County, Colorado, there are 65,000 students in that district. They have one superintendent. In the state of Wyoming, we have 93,000 students with 48 superintendents. So that's the problem.
Is some of that because it's in reservation?
Yep, I'm sure it is. I'm sure it is. I'm sure it is. So those are the issues that we're going to have to try to face. So yes, I think there are places we can save. To answer your question, I don't think I tried to dodge it, but yes, there are places we can find places to save money.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that having an honest conversation with the real facts, that's what I led with. I didn't realize a lot of what's going on. I haven't seen the numbers. They've been very tight about keeping numbers from all the legislators. It's like transparency in our budgeting process. I would say, honestly, there's maybe 5 legislators in the House that actually understand how the money runs in the House, from all the reserve accounts to the tips to when it gets to this percentage and this backfills and this makes a lap around here and it comes back into here. We don't know. You can sweep, when it hits this level, this money is swept into this account, and you start talking to people and their eyes cross, and they're just like, are we okay? Well, yeah, we're fine. I said, okay, well, then I guess it's okay then. And that's what we're trying to get away from. We're wanting transparency, and we're wanting to actually see the books. I would love to see zero-based budgeting. I mean, here's what you've got. Here's what you spend. It's the same thing you have to do. We know how much is coming in. We know how much we can spend.
So you could show it to us?
I can show it to you, and I can say, here's where we spent this, this, and this. And we audit it, and we make sure it got there. We have a lot of problems. We don't have a management audit committee anymore. There hasn't been a management audit committee. We're going to get that up and going again, because that committee was specifically to oversee all the agencies. Not to give them hell, but just to say, are you doing your job? And are there things that we can change in policy to help you do a better job or make it easier for you or whatever? That went away. I serve on it. We met once.
So do you think we have a deep state in the state of Wyoming?
Well, is a frog's butt watertight? Yes. We do. We got stuff that's been going on for a long time. Any state that's had this much money for this long, yes, there is waste. There are things that we can be more efficient about. What's that?
He'll come in and cut everything.
Yes, sir.
Not that I want to keep you longer, but
No,
I was just wondering.
She's driving home. Don't matter to me. I'm gonna sleep like a baby.
The amount of fuel tax we pay here in the state on fuel, burn, does all of that fund all the state highway maintenance? Totally.
Part of it. Most of our highway maintenance, especially on our interstates and things like that, is federal funding. Our education department is funded through the taxes and then also federal funding. So, and they're talking now about maybe adding a little bit more of a fuel tax, but I don't think that's gonna help at all. We just need to bring down the price of fuel if we can.
Did you have any idea for moving products that's taken in a year in fuel tax?
What's that?
Do you have any idea about how much is taken in each year in fuel tax?
I'd be lying to you if I could tell you that figure, but I can get you that figure. If you give me your name and number and I'll have it for you. How about that?
I mean, it has to be a tremendous amount when you look at the number of trucks.
Oh, yes. Well, I'll give you an idea. One company, I just found this out the other day, one company hauling frac sand in Crook County was spending $20,000 a day at the Coffee Cup fuel stop in Norcross. Hauling frac sand. $20,000 per day. There's fuel. And that's coming back here. And so if you say those trucks are driving you crazy, them boys there are helping pay to fix the roads. Yes, sir.
$3 a gallon.
No, it doesn't take long. And I mean, those trucks are hauling major amounts of frac sand. And so, and that's some of the other stuff, and that's why I want to chat with Curtis and Bill after we're over here. There was another discussion that we had of this was specifically about education, and it's in that book. I wrote some notes. But they like on transportation and special education and things like that, they will forecast those costs going forward for each term. And they said that they had forecast a 4% increase, which had been kind of consistent in education as far as transportation and special education. When they actually got the figures, they had increased by 9%. So they almost twice as much of the increase anticipated. And see, and those both are fully so here, and I don't know if Curtis, whatever his thought is or whatever, stop and think about transportation, of what we spend in dollars in transportation for education. What do you think? I'm just asking. Please don't shoot me. I do want to go home, and I love my wife and I have grandchildren. But if I ask you this, does it make sense that we as a state will load a bus in Hewlett, Wyoming, and send 2 drivers potentially on an overnight stay and drive all the way down to Little Snake River to play a game? Is that a smart, wise use of our funds? That is 100% reimbursable to the districts. So to me, there's no impetus to stay closer, have contests and stuff like that. I remember as a kid, we used to go play Bellfouche. We played Spearfish. We played local teams. Maybe we played their JV. We got experience. But there's some things happening at the state level that are saying, you've got to be in your district. You've got to be in your deals and stuff like that. Well, depending on the size of your school, I got a school over here at Norcroft that because of one particular religious group, it has extremely expanded the number of kids in the school, but none of those kids play sports. And so now that has put that school up in another category where they're having to travel farther in order to compete with their class. I mean, and you're paying for it. We have to compensate for that. So I think to these gentlemen's point and to my way of thinking is too, we need more local control instead of less local control about how we spend these dollars. And I think there has to be more of, like it used to be, I hate to say this, but we need to have more of the public's input in these local decision-making processes of what we do. And I think you'll be wiser about how to spend the money, because if they're just going to tell you, you do whatever you want, we're going to reimburse you for it, there's very little impetus. If I was to tell Curtis Rankin, Curtis, you get whatever piece of equipment you want, just send me the bill. Now, I'd like a new W235 rotary head, 16 foot with the auto steer. You send me the bill, Curtis. Is that what you need? Well, no, I don't have to have that. I mean, but it would be really nice. Okay, send me the bill. But I'm going to have to pay for it once I can't pay for any reason. Then yes.
This is probably more for him, but I'm curious about when you were talking about transportation.
Yes, sir.
How low a grade do they go down and still bus those kids?
That's what I was.
Yeah, I mean, like, we've got grandchildren. They're
Grade level.
like, yeah, like fourth grade. Do they bus them anywhere? 5th grade
for sporting events?
Yeah.
Just the high school.
Six, 7, starts at 6.
Starts at 6. So whenever they have kids lower grades that have to go play sports somewhere else, they have to be
Parents.
Yes.
Okay.
It's not a school sanction.
What were you saying?
So just last week, there was a bus that went from Newcastle to Gillette, and on the way to Gillette, it was a swimming bus. On the way to Gillette, it had a few swimmers on it. Most of them drove their parents. On the way home, it had two coaches and one student and one bus driver on the big long bus. From here, I mean, it just doesn't make sense. Why would we make it so burdensome?
So, any other questions? I'll hang around and visit. That's fine. If you need to go home, I appreciate it. Thank you guys very, very much for taking the time to come down here tonight. I very much appreciate it.
The new store. This is the one-stop shop. We have a pharmacy. We have a bootlegger's liquor. The deli, the food that you can get at a lunchtime is so amazing. The coffee shop. Certain Friday mornings, there's 30 people sitting here in all these chairs. This is the hub for people to come and visit, have their coffee, have their donuts. It's amazing what this area has done. Totally amazing.